Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Tim McGuinness. I'm the Managing Director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. Today, I'm standing in as a mirror image of Debby Montgomery Johnson. Don't I look just like Debby? And Debby is off in Hawaii, no doubt doing a zip line through the jungle because she does those kinds of things, or climbing a volcano, or galloping through lava tubes, or hanging 10 on Waikiki Beach. So Debby wasn't able to join us today, so she graciously and in good faith turned over her future and her show to moi. And hopefully I won't make a complete buffoon of myself and damage the reputation of her stand-up and speak-up show. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation with a couple of survivors of relationship scams, specifically romance scams, being that particular flavor. And what we're going to talk about is just ever so briefly scams themselves. But I'd like to explore today something that we've not explored in much detail, and that is, what does recovery actually mean? What does it feel like from the inside out? What do survivors of relationship scams, truthfully, financial fraud, because these are an incredibly serious crime, and it's important that we enunciate that clearly, that we use the right vocabulary, because vocabulary controls much about the way we think. And as a result, if we use minimizing or inappropriate or blaming terminology, this has an impact not only on survivors themselves, but also, in effect, granting permission to other people who may not understand this phenomenon to blame the victims themselves. And remember, victims of financial fraud are not to blame for what happened to them. These criminals are extraordinarily sophisticated. They use very well developed scripts, processes, techniques to target an individual, to groom them, to manipulate them, and ultimately to control them, to allow the criminals to harvest their money or their assets, or in some cases, to control them into being an unwitting accessory to the criminal's crimes. And it's important to remember that victims are not to blame. They should not feel shame or guilt or self-doubt, because this was done without their consent, without their control. And it's always important to remember these. And vocabulary is the starting point for establishing this mindset going forward, which is so important in the recovery of every individual. Because honestly, and don't you hate it when people say honestly, but I say it for emphasis. Every victim who's come out of a relationship scam, and a relationship scam, by the way, is defined very simply, it's a form of financial fraud that is based upon a trust relationship between the victim and the criminal executing the crime. Now, there may be more than one criminal executing the crime. It could be a team, and often these criminals will adopt different roles if there are different persona involved in the crime, or they may stage themselves where one individual criminal performs a part of the crime, such as the introduction and grooming phase, and then another may perform the deeper manipulation, and then finally there may be a closer who does the control to ultimately harvest the money from the victim. So today joining me are two seasoned survivors. Now, one of them Miss Ontario is reaching or just passing her 6-month point in recovery. And we're going to talk a little bit about what recovery actually means. And then also joining me is Miss Texas, 1898. Just joking. Sorry about that. Ms. Texas has been through a unique experience. And Ms. Texas, how long has it been since your scam ended?
3 years and 3 months ago.
Okay.
So it ended in the end of February of 2019.
Okay. So relax. This is just going to be a conversation. No pressure, right? So grab yourself a screwdriver and double shot of vodka, and we'll begin the conversation. So Ms. Texas has been through a little bit of a different cycle. She went through the early stages, the mid stages, the more advanced stages, and had the benefit of facing one of the criminals actually in federal court and seeing that person sentenced for more than a decade in federal prison. So not often do survivors get to experience the justice side of things. But, you know, as we're going to talk about, the criminal justice system doesn't provide closure. The only thing that provides closure is really the ability to fully accept that you're the victim of a criminal who willfully and without your consent targeted you, victimized you deliberately, and left you sort of by the side of the road, so to speak, with not a care in the world about what happened afterwards, and left it up to each person to recover from this experience. And again, I apologize to both of my guests, Miss Ontario and Miss Texas, if I say things that are triggering, because truth is, when you experience a significantly traumatic event, those triggers can remain for years, long period of time. But with time and with focus, you can dull the triggers down to the point where often it will just be a momentary reaction. So maybe let's start with Miss Ontario. You know, one of the things that we say is that romance scam victims were not in love with the criminal. But yet the reality is you had feelings for him because they expertly groomed their victims, triggering what are called amygdala hijacks, sometimes called love bombs. And they do this with a specific intent, and they do it with a certain frequency so that it repetitively triggers hormone and neurotransmitter responses in the brain to achieve a feeling that is very much like love. Many psychologists will tell you that when you feel butterflies in the stomach, that's not love. That's hormones. True love comes through a long-term trust relationship. But trust me, I am no expert in that, having been through my own number of relationships. So, but I take this very seriously because as managing director of SCARS, we provide financial fraud victim recovery services to help individuals make it through this process alive. And when I say that, I'm not actually joking, because 15 to 20 people take their life every day as a result of these crimes. And I don't know if we want to bring that topic up. If either of you feel comfortable talking about some of the thoughts that you may have had during the course of the time period after the scam. This is not a support call. What we're trying to do is help people understand how profound these experiences are on their victims. And in many respects, how after the scam ends, that's just the beginning, because then the real gravity, the real consequences begin to set in, and how profoundly difficult that can be. So, I don't want to distress either of you. So if you can't talk about it, it's okay. No harm, no foul. So let's start with Miss Ontario. This is a little bit fresher for you. So can you kind of tell the audience a little bit about where you were emotionally right after the scam ended? First, can I ask, did it end in the criminal ghosting you, or did you simply block them without confronting them? Did you confront it? Was there hostility? We don't need to get into the deep, dark details of that if you're uncomfortable with it. But
Well,
so can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you?
Thank you, Dr. Tim. My scam lasted 6 months, and I am 6 months recovery now. And
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you, thank you. I'm proud of that. I am
good
proud
cause.
of that and I've worked extremely hard at this. I will tell you, because one of the first questions you were kind of saying is about the feelings. I absolutely felt love and affection in the fraudulent relationships by these criminals. And I say criminals because I know now there was 5 people I feel 5 people, not just one. I feel there were 5 people, one being a woman. And I know that the criminal's intent was to defraud me. But what I did feel was real emotion, and it was created against my will, and it was through expert manipulation. And how mine ended, I ended it. When I realized I didn't even use the word scam, it hadn't even entered my head. I was thinking, this is a predator. That time I thought it was a predator. I went to the police. It took me 3 times going to the police before I actually got out of my car to walk into the police station with a whack of documents saying, I think I was mumbling through my words and crying. I need to see someone. I want to tell my story. I have a predator after me, and I will only tell my story to one person only, and I want it to be at the sergeant's level, and I will only tell the story once. And the sergeant came to me, and then I unraveled like Humpty Dumpty. I was broken into a million pieces. And when the light came on that this wasn't, I wasn't even using the right word. I did not have hindsight because I did not have the knowledge. I realized it was a scam at the extreme level, and I never, ever give away money. So it was profound, the manipulation that was used on me, that I gave money away. Not a person that gives money away, but I did. So so what happened immediately following, when I realized this is what it was, I guess not having connected with scars yet, but immediately they gave me a crisis worker right there at the police station. A crisis worker came right in to see me because I was on the ledge, seriously on the ledge. So they gave me a crisis worker right away, wouldn't let me leave the police station. I had a crisis worker. I had all the lifeline calls. I used all the lifeline calls. I was calling around the clock. My brain went completely, I didn't have a brain. There was no brain. I couldn't retain anything. My memory was gone, and I knew I had a million things I had to do, and I couldn't even form a sentence on how to do what I was supposed to do. But so I guess that was, I must tell you that I kept the criminal on the line for another whole week, because he continued to call me and email me and all kinds of love stuff, and I kept him on for a week. I didn't tell them that I knew he was a scammer, because I thought I've got him as live bait on the phone. So police and sergeants and detectives. I've got him. You can come and get him. You would call that now. I know that was called, I was scam baiting him for a week, hoping that they could just catch him. They could just catch him. Why can't they catch him? I have him live. They couldn't do it. Everything was so fake, and all the documents I had on him was so fake. So after a week, I just texted him and said that I was finished, I was done, and there would be no more. And I never heard from him again.
Okay.
Did that kind of answer that question? Did? Okay.
Yes, completely. Let me stop you there so that you can take a deep breath, take a drink of coffee, because this is hard. So I think you said several things that were really interesting. And one of them is, often in the days following a scam, people are in shock. And everybody responds to shock, psychological shock, trauma, in different ways. There's 4 basic trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Most people don't know about freeze and fawn. But most victims at that stage feel kind of an urgency to do something about it. Partly it's a desire for retribution, for revenge, although it may not be really characterized as revenge, but there's a desire for justice. Something must happen, something must get done. Unfortunately, the continuation of contact with the criminals does more harm than good. And I know a lot of people out there completely disagree with it. Fine, hate me. But the reality is that it's like, let me equate this to like traffic accidents, right? So you're in a serious traffic accident, and miraculously you walk away from it pretty much uninjured. Seatbelts, airbags, great things. But then you feel this urgency to get justice. I was in an accident, somebody has to pay, right? That's a little bit the mentality that happens immediately following the scam. And unfortunately, then it's like you just spend your days looking at traffic accidents, trying to figure out God's plan or the physics of the universe. Why does this happen? It's a search for answers, in effect. So this search for answers can often be quite devastating in and of itself. In the case of scams, a lot of victims will just drown themselves in looking at scammer photos or trying to hunt them down to get answers. It's not always about revenge. Many times it's searching for the reason why things happen, because we don't know. And it's quite destructive psychologically to a victim's ability to really put the event behind them and look to their future. It's a bit like dragging an anchor. If you're constantly looking over your shoulder into the past, you cannot be looking into the future. You cannot heal from something. The best analogy I know is if you've ever had a toothache, a serious toothache, abscess, whatever, the more you think about it, the more it hurts. And in the reality, the minute you forget about it, pain goes away. So all of us have been there and done that. Well, those with bad teeth of one nature or another. And so the more you worry a wound, the more it's going to hurt. And the longer it's going to take for it to be overcome. We call this scam fixation. Victims following the crime become fixated in an obsessive way about trying to find answers. But the answers are not in scammer photos. They're not in groups that focus on anger and hate towards these criminals. The answer is in turning away and trying to recover emotional stability, become centered, and then focus on your future. And it's really hard. Miss Texas, I know when your scam ended, because I know you, um, you also had difficulty for quite some time in getting there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that period if you can still remember it. Trauma is one of those son of a gun things that really screws with your ability to think. So does shock, but shock is trauma. Um, but shock is a more like a hurricane going on in your head. So many things triggered by the emotional responses coming out of the amygdala and other parts of that lizard brain are just squirming around, chatting all the time. And the logical part of your brain is kind of like, whoa, I'm just going to take a step back and let all of you guys talk amongst yourselves for a while. But maybe you can talk about a little bit, if you can recall, that period when your scam ended and how you felt in maybe the first month or so. Ms. Texas?
Okay. So, my scammer, there was about a month where, there was 4 different stages of my scam. And that last stage, supposedly he was in jail. So he was trying to get some more money out of me. And I was in debt badly. And I really was not going to be able to help him at all. Of course, they were trying to get me to reach out to family members, and I was not going to do that. And so after about a month, I told him, I said, I've got to get my money back. You've got to repay me. And he told me, he said, well, it's complicated. I said, well, what do you mean it's complicated? And he said, I'm a poor man from Africa. And my world just completely shattered at that point. I think Debby Montgomery says it well when she says that there was a lot of pink flags. And I think that we all might relate to that. And so at that point, my feelings inside were they were frozen, but at the same token, I was always shaking inside. I'm amazed I was still able to think through work. Work was actually an out for me. But besides work, I'm like, oh my God, this is just horrible. And there were times where I didn't want to, I thought in the morning, how am I going to live through this? And there was, how should I end this? Can I end this? So those suicidal, I'm not going to say, I just don't know how I don't know why I'm still here on this earth. Let me just put it that way. And that went on for about 3 months. I was very bad. And I was not talking to anybody about it.
Yeah.
It was all inside. I did look for victims. I started looking for some support though online, and that's how I found scars.
Thank you.
So if it wasn't for finding scars right away, again, I honestly don't think I'd be here right now.
Right.
And, and then I did keep myself busy though. I worked a part-time job Ubering for the first 9 months after the scam. And I think that really helped me because it was a distraction, and it also helped me to try to start paying off some of these debts that I had accumulated. So that was helpful. And it wasn't until the winter of that year that I reached out for some trauma counseling.
I
But
think the Uber is particularly important because often is the case that when you're going through that shock and that initial reaction, self-isolation is a very heavy toll on all scam victims. And suicidal thoughts are not uncommon with a traumatic experience, particularly one where you're overwhelmed with the consequences of what has happened. Other types of victims of crime experience the same thing, but kind of what you both described is this sort of reaction that it's a reality shock. You have a perception of the world the way it is, and then all of a sudden that perception is shattered like a broken mirror. Kind of the equivalent of being a little kid and looking under the bed and there really is a monster there. Although you always knew there was a monster, so maybe that's confirmation. But nevertheless, we as adults have great difficulty because of our cognitive biases in accepting a world where there truly are monsters. And yet everybody is fascinated by the monsters and in fact glorifies them. You remember the series Inventing Anna, for example. Anna was a monster, and yet it was the victims in that scenario even hating on each other, but Anna was the true monster. Now, was she mentally ill, or was she a creature of her own invention? Don't know, don't care, because the reality is the impact is what matters. And I'm pleased to say that the court, finding her guilty, reflected on that. Just like in Miss Texas, your case, when the court addressed the criminal in the case, it didn't matter whether he came from a poor African country or not. He was a monster. And, Miss Ontario's term predator is a very accurate description. They are predators. That's the one euphemism I think that is really accurate about these criminals. They're predators, and they're no different than any other human predator. They have the ability to rationalize their thinking about, oh, poor me, I'm from a poor African country, you colonialists exploited us. Bullshit. You're a criminal. All criminals justify their criminal deeds. We're fortunate enough to have an extraordinary gentleman as an advisor, somebody who I like personally, Brett Johnson. I'm a little offended by his current employer's choice of the word felon when they introduce him. It's accurate, and it's very blaming. I prefer to think of him as a reformed criminal. I think that's a more apt description of him. So we understand the criminal mind quite well and how criminals justify these things. Miss Ontario, you raised your hand a while back. You had a thought about what Debbie was saying.
Well, I did have a thought.
What Miss Texas was saying.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So Miss Texas, when you were talking about suicide and thoughts, I had that. I had a plan, boy. I had such a plan for myself about suicide, and I was going to get that right. If I got nothing else right, I'd get that right. I remember feeling that for quite a long time. When I think about the criminals in my case, the profession of love, the profession about God, so much was about God and honesty and not even telling a white lie. And I thought, oh my goodness, this criminal is like a saint. He's so religious and so professes so much love. And I keep thinking, oh my goodness, how could I be so worthy of this kind of person who made me feel beautiful inside and out? And when it ended, the shame and the guilt that I felt, I couldn't even stand straight. I couldn't even look up. My eyes were downcast. I couldn't hold my head up. I couldn't do any, I was like a turtle in my shell. I just was so completely broken, beyond description how broken I was. I want to though tell you how scars came into my life, because I had a crisis there, a crisis worker right with me, and I had calls coming into me 24 hours a day. And, you know, not 20, I mean, I had lifelines, and I was using the lifelines a lot. And so then it was through my trauma therapist. I got a trauma therapist really quickly because I scored so high on the scale of severity that I got a trauma therapist really fast. And the trauma therapist is the one that told me, researched and said, there's this thing called scars. I said, well, okay, because I have a thirst for knowledge, and that's how I connected with scars. I guess I got connected into scars about 3 weeks after my scam ended. So between scars and my trauma therapist and my family doctor, and I knew then that I had a will to live. I was going to be a will to live. I was not going to be in an obituary section. That's when I knew you will not find me in the obituary section. I will live through this and I will come out of this. So that's when I became addicted to everything about scars and all the guides and everything, because I needed it all around me all the time to come through the horribleness of this. Even in my criminal, of course, my criminal got the virus, dying, don't you know, dying, absolutely dying. So what could I do about that? I mean, I bought that story that he was dying. I bought, you know, my criminal made me the beneficiary of his will. I saw all these legal papers coming through to me, making me the beneficiary from fiduciary agents and everything. I'm going, oh my, I don't want $10 million. Like, it was a huge amount of money. I don't want it. I don't want it. Why are you doing this? But that's the paperwork, the documentation that came forward to me about I was going to receive this and that, and I didn't want any of that. Dear God, I just wanted them to live. Very complicated. Everybody's story is different, but the layers of the paperwork that came through to me, that I thought, this has to be real. Look at the lawyer signatures. Look at all these forms I'm getting. Look at the fiduciary agent. Look at the contact I'm getting. The doctors are calling me. Anyways, that was part of my story towards the end.
Let me raise a different topic now, because we want to talk a little bit about recovery.
Yeah.
In the SCARS recovery program, we have a variety of focuses that all run essentially parallel to each other. And because of the sort of chaotic nature of new victims coming in and people who've been with us for longer periods of time, survivors, it's a little chaotic in its aspect, but it's sort of designed to be that way. One of the things that we acknowledge and recognize that's really important is victims spend so much time with the criminals in chats and the rare phone calls and maybe the extraordinarily rare view on a video, but mostly in chats, 24 hours a day. And of course, we know that this is not just communication. It's a manipulation and control mechanism too, because they're going to send chats in the middle of the night. Of course, they're in Africa or wherever the hell they are. So they're out of sync from a clock point of view, but they also do this deliberately to deprive you of sleep. A sleep-deprived person is more easily controlled, manipulated, and their reality more easily altered. So when the scam ends, there's this huge void that you've spent sometimes 40 hours a week in chats and conversations with these criminals during the course of the week that goes on for months. and then it just ends. Anybody who's had a relationship end knows what this feels like. You live in this void after it ends, and what do you do with yourself? And that's devil's playground, right? So one of the things that we do is we've developed this extensive body of knowledge about the various granular aspects of these crimes from many different perspectives. We talk about the psychology of scams and breaking it down to things like in general discussion and individual discussions of particular cognitive biases. Like one of them that everybody has is this thing called stranger trust. It's what the criminals know that they can count on to lure you in. Another kind of a cognitive bias is this thing called confirmation bias. And the criminals are really good about playing off of your biases and feeding you the information so that you self-confirm what you believe to be true. It's a real person, they're in love with you, and blah, blah, blah. When the scam ends, there's another cognitive bias that plays havoc called hindsight bias. Ms. Texas and also Debby Montgomery talk about the pink flags. Well, there were no flags. You didn't see them. You think you see them because of this thing called hindsight bias. Children in the back row, look it up on Google. So hindsight bias makes you believe that you saw things that weren't there. This is a trauma compensation mechanism to make you feel better so that you can heal and move forward. Just didn't see them. Trust me. Nobody ever sees anything because we're humans and we're basically amoeba running around on two legs and thinking that we think. So the reality is you come out of this with a lot of stuff going on. All of the baggage that you had going into the scam is still with you and worse. So we focus on education. Why is education important? Rather than looking at a gazillion scammer photos, which do nothing other than elicit emotional responses, reinforcing those emotional memories and trauma and reactions, instead, we try to get people to read or look at non-scammer face related videos. And again, we recognize that people learn in different ways. Reading is one. Reading is actually the best because reading occupies several parts of your brain and helps transfer control from the amygdala, from the lizard brain squirming around in the back of your head, to the frontal part of your brain, the monkey brain, that makes us intelligent. Although octopus are intelligent and they don't have a frontal lobe. But the point being is to help you fill your time after the scam ends so that you're not left sitting there alone in the dark with all of these gazillion thoughts through your head. As you read, it can be very overwhelming in the very beginning because you get overloaded quickly. But as time goes by, your capacity to absorb more increases and it becomes a substitute for the void that's left after the crime ended. Ms. Texas, can maybe you talk about that a little bit? What are your thoughts?
So, first and foremost, I needed to know I wasn't alone because during the scam and then right after the scam, I felt like I was the only person in the world that this has ever happened to. So by me finding scars and seeing the posts on scars was so reassuring to me. But I think the first thing I connected to right away is the thought-provoking questions that would be posted.
In our support groups.
In our support groups, yes, because that's what, to me, I looked forward to on a daily basis. I did realize that there is an addiction to these scammers. And you're absolutely right there because you spend so much time, back and forth with them. So in that, and Dorothy even mentioned this too. So I looked forward to, okay, what's the thought-provoking questions that are being asked today? So, and what are people responding to? That to me was priceless. And I know that there were times where, you know, people were not responding, but there was, and I know I've mentioned this before in previous conversations. So sometimes there would be a thought-provoking question that at the time I was just not able to write it down. But it didn't mean that I wasn't thinking about it.
No, I
So
know.
sometimes we don't always, you know, we don't always get that response. And then as far as the articles went, you know, it really helped me to slowly, and I mean slowly, understand what the heck happened, you know, because, and I asked that question, I mean, 3 years in, you know, what happened? Why did it happen?
Right.
You know, how did I get myself into this mess?
Do you
So,
understand? Do you understand the why now?
yes, yes, I do. But it took a long, long time. And even though, and we do need to hear it repeated over and over again, that, you know, you should not feel embarrassed. You should not feel ashamed. Well, it's easier said than done.
I know.
I'm sorry, it just is.
Absolutely right.
You know, but it needs to be said. And I had, when I finally was able to go to court last fall, there was that huge weight of guilt finally got taken off of me. But, you know, it's not, do I still feel some shame? Absolutely. You know, but it's not to the degree that it used to be. So, I mean, it just takes time. I mean, that's all this is. This was a life-changing impact on me anyway. So I'm so grateful for this group to be there. I'm grateful for my trauma counselor, because without the two of these together, I honestly don't know where I'd be. Another thing I want to, you mentioned earlier about, I don't even remember how we brought it up, but, you know, when I think about the scammers, you know, why did they do this? You know? And I have a real trouble with that, because I'm an honest person. I try to be. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but, and you said something a long time ago, Dr. Tim, that really made so much sense. And I heard actually two different things. I heard one thing from you, and I heard one thing from somebody else, is that a rattlesnake is just a snake. They come along, they bite, it's just what they do.
It's like the old story of the frog and the scorpion, and the scorpion arrives at the river and can't cross, so promises the frog that if the frog carries him across the river, he won't sting the frog. Midway across the river, scorpion stings the frog, kills them both, and the frog asks in his final breath, "Why did you do this?" And the scorpion answers, "Because I'm a scorpion."
Right. And that kind of goes back to the only mistake that I know we make is we let the scammer in. We replied back to them. So it took me a long time to understand that and not take the whole thing on myself. And then the other thing, there's just bad in the world. There is just bad.
Pure evil.
There's just
But
pure evil.
The worst evil isn't from malevolence. You know, serial killers are evil, but on a scale of 1 to 10, they're only 5, in my opinion. As an anthropologist, I'm not a psychologist. Real evil in the world is ambivalence. It's good people turning a blind eye to evil deeds. Whether it's a guard at Auschwitz, and I lost my great-grandparents in Auschwitz, to, whether it's a political party, we are so full of our biases that we want to believe that often we don't take the time to really analyze, is what I'm doing evil? And it's important. And the criminals, of course, and this is one of the weird things, is people tend to put all of these criminals in a basket, and they're not. There are some big baskets. Nigeria's got well over 1 million of these criminals in their country. The majority of them are college students or college graduates. They're not guys half naked sitting on a floor someplace in the middle of some shanty town. They work out of luxurious homes in Nigerian standards, and they justify what they do. There is this perception of apologizing for the criminals. Never apologize for a criminal. Criminal makes a decision to be a criminal. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are people at risk, but it's their upbringing, it's their parents that gave them the morality that they have. And we have to put this in context. As a friend of mine, PJ Rohan from About Fraud says, but in the context, we have to be careful not to apologize for the criminals. Poverty isn't the issue. Lack of opportunity isn't the issue, because crime always pays better than any good job that you can get as a college graduate. The only thing that pays better, and some would argue that that is crime, is being an entrepreneur. So unless you create a company that's wildly successful, no matter what you do, crime is going to pay better, but it comes with risks. But so does working in a real job. Everything that we do in life comes with risk, unless we're an ascetic Buddha sitting on the ground afraid to move for fear of harming the insects that are around us. Unless we completely withdraw from the world, there are risks in everything that we do. But criminals need to own what they did. And Brett Johnson is a perfect example of somebody who did the time, who owned what he did, apologized for the world, and is trying to make the world a better place, utilizing the experience and the wisdom that he gained along the way. He's a good guy who did some bad things. And I can completely understand that and have no difficulty acknowledging that. So, Miss Ontario.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be a good time for me to
go
cut
ahead.
out. Okay.
So, thank you for joining us, Miss Texas. Appreciate you being on the call. And we're going to go another 9-10 minutes. And I think we've covered some incredible ground today. So, Miss Ontario, picking up on what Debbie was talking about, on the benefit of learning our approach in the support group. And by the way, the reason that we ask questions is specifically to create triggers, because trauma has a way of fogging the brain, of occluding, hiding things from you. And asking targeted questions often gives you an opportunity to think about it and recall certain memories that you might never have found again otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. So around the recovery for myself, I have worked really hard on recovery, and I could only do this with the combination of two things: my trauma therapist, who helped me incredibly, and SCARS, because SCARS has been my education. And I have written more in the last 6 months, pen and paper, of books and books and writing and writing and writing, because I auditorily need to hear it. I need to write it down. I need to read it again and again and again. And every time I read it, I take more from it. All the booklets that SCARS has provided, whether, some of the toughest ones, I think, was the whole path of learning to love myself again. Was I worthy of that, of loving myself again? That was a hard booklet to complete, because I realized how much work I needed to do in that area, recovering from the blaming myself and feeling guilty. You know, I've worked so hard on improvement and getting better. I could never have done it without the education of scars, of being with other people on a Zoom call and seeing other faces of real people who are intelligent women. These are not, we are an intelligent group of women. We are good people that something bad happened to, you know.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
You know, you said something really interesting. Nobody in our experience, in the 12,000 or so people who've gone through our support groups in one way or another over the years, not one of them has been a stupid person.
No.
None of them are particularly intelligent. IQs are what they are, but they're all normal people. Some
Yes.
of them are quite brilliant. But none of them are stupid. None of them are gullible. None of them are naive. Even though that people use those words, they don't apply. And none of them are brainwashed. And I want to talk about brainwash. God, this is such an overused, incorrectly used term. And the amateurs use it all the time, but it's so derogatory for a victim. Brainwashing is for the purpose of changing a person's belief system.
Mm.
It's done forcibly. Brainwashing includes physical force. Now, an argument can be said that manipulation is force. It is a violation, yes. But the truth is, and this is a hard thing to accept, scammers don't force their victims. The devil never forces someone to sin. They manipulate, they control, but they don't force. And this is where the guilt comes in, and the shame and the self-blaming comes in, because when you look back at that, you say, well, how could I have done this? The scammer didn't force me to do it, but their manipulation is even more powerful than the use of force. No scam victim has been brainwashed, because you come out of this with your belief system intact. That's the differentiator between brainwashing. Manipulation doesn't require that you change your beliefs. It requires that you change your behavior and your thought processes. So, sorry, Ms. Please continue.
I know, you know, mine was through Plenty of Fish. And I know that
Plenty of Fish, the website?
Yep. Yep.
Or as we call it, Plenty of Frauds.
Exactly. Plenty of Frauds. And I was a victim of a very sophisticated international fraud. It was non-consensual, and I was completely under their control, and I was groomed expertly by a group of criminals, and I was under their control until I was able to escape.
Exactly.
And I escaped, and I'm here today, and I today can say I love myself again. Didn't know that was going to be possible, to love myself again and to get back who I am. And I am wiser. I am grateful to scars and the recovery process, which I am still in. It's not over. No. I continue. It's absolutely not over. There is, you know, the financial recovery at my age isn't going to happen, but I am okay. It's different. It's different, but I am a survivor, and I am proud of where I was to who I am today. I was on a slippery slope, and the scars, education, the guides, the posts, absolutely is been major in who I am today and how I've come out of it. And I wanted to talk today because I want other people to know this happens. It happens can happen to anybody. can happen, and it happens to everybody. And I want
2.5 million romance scam victims in 2021 in the United States alone.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Rolling back the hands of time, back to the period right after the scam.
Mhm.
You know, we have a lot of victims who become survivors, and we characterize a survivor as someone who has accepted the truth that they're a victim of a crime. Until you really get that wired into your head, you're not really a survivor yet. You're still a victim. But winding back the hands of time, you're now at the 6-month point. Could you have imagined early on that this would be as lengthy a process as it is?
I did not know it would be this lengthy of a process. I knew I was damaged goods. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what recovery would be. It was a new field for me. I had no benchmark on how long this was going to take, because emotionally and mentally, I was nothing. I was absolutely nothing when I came out of this. Financially bad. My everything in my self-esteem, every single thing about me, and I'm not a spring chicken, was destroyed. It was baby step after baby step after baby step to recover. So I know now I have a stretch to go, but I'm getting there, and it's long. It's a long process. It doesn't matter to me how much money somebody gave or how long they were in it. It doesn't matter whether somebody was in it for a year or gave huge money or less money. Everybody's case is their case and their story, and recovery is a long process. And if you have to invest in it. If you don't invest in it.
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have to do the work to get the benefit. It's
Yeah.
a long journey, and there are lions and tigers and bears, oh my, along the way, and flying monkeys and everything else that goes along with this, to use the Wizard of Oz metaphor. But
And I just want to make a comment about Debby Montgomery. Debby Montgomery, I read her book as soon as I heard of Debby, I got her book. I read her book. She is an amazing human being, amazing person. And she's stand up and speak up, this forum. God bless her. Yeah.
indeed,
Mhm.
we're extraordinarily proud to count her amongst our SCAR's board of directors and one of our SCAR's officers. So we're extraordinarily grateful to have her. Debby approaches this from a different perspective than my side of the house, which is more nuts and bolts and analytical. And Debby comes at things from a more humanistic, motivational side. Of course, we're all certified life coaches as well. And the important part of this is that, there are many sides to that. And that is one of those parallel sides. There's education, there's motivation, there's coaching. And what we do is to be the signposts along the yellow brick road that hopefully will get you to the Emerald City eventually. But some people will never get there because they never start. And this is the great challenge with trying to provide recovery services to crime victims, online financial fraud victims, that they allow themselves to be so distracted and derailed by the snake oil salesmen, the amateurs that are out there, who have no idea what they're doing. They're so full of anger and hate that they're incapable of even admitting that they're victims. I was ripped a new one, so to speak, recently because we published a position paper on why amateur groups are so harmful to a victim's recovery. They do serve some purpose for victims to be able to discover that they're in a scam, but looking at pictures is not a reliable way to prove it anyway, because nobody has a catalog of every stolen photo that exists. There are billions of them. We've got a catalog of 1 million photos, and we'll never be done. We add thousands a month, but that's because we have to, because otherwise those victims that are in that frenetic cyclone of searching for answers, who want to look for photos, okay, but we put a big glaring advisory: this may increase your trauma if you do this. We're not going to stop them, but neither are we focused on that in any way, shape, or form. We encapsulate them in a video, and it goes by really, really quick because we don't want them fixating on this.
I only ever looked at the photos once. It was on the site, of course. I looked once. I went, oh dear, and I never went back to it. Never wanted to look at it. Absolutely never.
Best case scenario, it happens in the days or the weeks after the scam ends, and then you learn through our wise teachings that no, it's not good for you. It's a bit like being an alcoholic and holding the AA meetings in a liquor store. It just doesn't work.
No.
And if you think about it, it's logical that it doesn't work, but people are so invested in their anger that they cannot see the light. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why only about 1/3 of scam victims will successfully recover from this. And by successfully recover, I mean that they will have dealt with their trauma, they will have dealt with their baggage that they brought into this. Counseling is not only to recover from a scam, but it is to help you repair your resiliency that has been so damaged by this event, so that you can live a happier, healthier life into the future and not regret, not feel ashamed, not feel burdened with guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. And trauma therapy brought up for me past things in my life that I had never, ever said out loud. So trauma therapists, it all came out. Things that were way hidden, way in the back, that I'd never spoken to anybody ever.
Yeah.
That were significant trauma events. Yeah. So,
you know, the analogy is you have a bad traffic accident, you're injured, and you go in the hospital and they find you have cancer. Not a pleasant thought, but it is the notion that this is an opportunity. Stupid as that sounds, this is an opportunity to give your brain a tune-up.
yeah.
If you take the opportunity. Thank you, Miss Ontario. This has been an extraordinary conversation. Very appreciative of your time. I hope that this was not too triggering, and that hopefully you might have gained some insights today. Do you have any final thoughts before we close this?
I so appreciate being asked to participate in this. It was my time. I needed to do this. I did it for selfish reasons. I wanted to do it because I was ready to do it, wanted to do it. I knew that this would help me. Today, you know, I'm here for a reason. I want to pay it forward. I have a long way to go, but I do try now, and I live fully present. I do like life, and I know that I'm brave, and I know I'm courageous. I know I'm vulnerable, but I am here, and I hope that my messaging and what we talked about today reaches out to people to listen and hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That is the key characteristic of recovery, is you have to show up. You have to do the work. You have to learn. You have to pay attention to the reasons why this happens. And the truth is, We do have answers for all of it. Everything is knowable. There, it wasn't voodoo or juju. There's no magic involved in how scams happen. It's human psychology. Our brains are wired the way they are. We are inherently scammable. Dogs, and so are octopus. You can scam a cat. And it's funny to watch their reactions when they get scammed, bait and switch and all the rest of that good stuff. But it is part of the human experience that our biases lead us down paths that are wrong. And that is the uniqueness of the human experience, that we can, if we choose to, understand why the mistake was made and how to retrace our path or cut across a field and get back on the right path. Criminals can also change. They can also be reformed. But they're not, we can say they're monsters, but the truth is they're just humans too, that have so deluded themselves through their rationalization that what they're doing is acceptable. We do talk to some of them over time that realize their mistakes and leave it because they can't deal with it anymore. I'm not apologizing for criminals, but I do recognize that we're all human beings and that our brains don't often work the way we think they do. So, thank you, Miss Ontario, for being with me today. My name is Dr. Tim McGuinness, Managing Director of Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, Inc. You can learn more about scams, scammers, fraud, criminals, and victim recovery on romancescamsnow.com. Our corporate website is againstscams.org. I encourage anybody to look us up, verify who we are with the state database for the state of Florida, where we are incorporated as a nonprofit. We are a global NGO supporting victims of online financial fraud scams worldwide. There is no such thing as race, gender, creed, religion, or national origin in our world. We support everybody around the world, regardless of their faith, regardless of their beliefs, regardless of their skin color, because every victim has the same shade of pain, and that's what we're here to help with. So I thank Debby Montgomery Johnson for allowing me to hijack her show and stand in today in her stead. And thank you all for joining us today. We don't have time for questions, but we will wish you all the very best for your future. And if you are the victim of financial fraud, whether it's phone, email, text, or through websites, come and find us. Find us on Facebook, and we will help you. No charge. All of SCAR's services are free. We are a nonprofit organization, so if you'd like to make a donation, you can donate to SCAR's at donate.againstscams.org. We also publish a broad range of books specifically written for scam victims or their families, and those are available at shop.againstscams.org. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Miss Ontario, and thank you, Miss Texas, for joining us today. This has been a great show. Thank you much.